In Ghetto's Madonna and Child, he's using egg tempera, and I have a video for you so that you can see how it's made and how it's applied. Tempera is not my favorite medium, and they use it a lot, a cheaper version of it for elementary school, but it is kind of chalky and it flakes after time. So again, this is tempera on panel. It is more realistic. The volume of the Madonna's knee to the actual bodies under the, you can actually sense the actual body underneath the drapery. The neck is modeled and curved. But still, as you can see, the foreshortening is not very, or not the foreshortening, the perspective is not very good. She looks like she might kind of be standing with a little bit of her knees sitting down. But remember, this is done in 1310. They weren't quite there as far as perspective. It's a high Renaissance where real perspective is developed and they perfect it. To the 14th century Italian audience, they would have understood the ideal love that was being depicted here, a love between the mother and son, and the extension of the greater love of God for humanity. And I always have to comment on the colors. Here again, we have primary color scheme, triad. So blue, red, and gold. A blue to me is always signal of heaven, and the red is the blood of Christ, and then the gold is the riches of heaven. That's how I see color. So this is very well done. Of course, this would have been in the church somewhere. Okay, so here is another example of a cartoon. So again, the cartoon in High Renaissance 1510 would have been the preliminary drawing done before the actual painting. To see, part of it is to make sure that the artist can draw it and that they like the composition and that everything will flow and look like it needs to. So here is the preliminary drawing, red chalk on paper, and let's look at the painting here. So if you go and look back at the other slide, you can definitely see the cartoon's influence on the female's figure. You can see the back, the twist of her body, the kind of twist, contour pose is what they would have called it. We have some beautiful modeling of the back. The muscles are very well defined. A gradation is developed. This is a fresco again. Oh, and the development of color is just spectacular. You have orange and green, it's in the composition is very dynamic. If you close your eyes and take a moment and find the focal point, I feel like it's the woman's face, and she's holding a book or something. I'm not quite sure what's going on here, but the composition is very dynamic. Movement, a circular motion is being created by her figure. Okay, in this painting by Botticelli, this artist is incredibly famous. If you ever get an opportunity to look at his work, please, please do so. The muses here, you have, they're dancing. There's a video I have linked up that I want you to watch because I can't remember all of it off the top of my head, but able to go into great detail what each one of these groupings mean. You can see just by looking at it the awesome development of the drapery, how you can see through and it drapes around the figure, and the figure is modeled, it has gradations to make it look more round and lifelike. And of course you have these beautiful colors, reds and blues, and the figures have a little bit of a tinge of yellow, so the triad complementary scheme, again, always love that. And then you have the blues with the red, almost a little bit of an orange. Me and color, I love color. But yes, please take a moment and look at the little video that I have attached. It will go into more detail as far as the meaning of the painting. Okay, so in Green's work, Don't Name Fish After Friends, 1999 to 2009, is another example of egg tempera. Not a very big piece, it's 24 by 18 inches, just to give you another example of the possibilities that can be used with this medium. Yeah, I guess the fish here is going to eat, or the cat is going to eat the fish. So yeah, you don't want to name fish after your friends. It has a nice movement. You see a little bit of the hatching in the water. It's diagonal. And so diagonal adds kind of a feeling of movement as well as the lines in the water. Kind of a silly painting. Okay, so I have a video on oil painting that I'll also include on the module, but this is just to show you a diagram of the different layers that are involved in oil painting. The oil painting is very corrosive. You can think of it when you get a hamburger and the napkin around the hamburger, it gets that grease on it. And if you were to keep that napkin like in a week or two, it would just fall apart. Oil just is very destructive. It's very organic and it just eats away at whatever backing you might put there. So in on the diagram on the left, you have your wood, you have your cloth, ground, white plaster, and paint layers. So you have your, depending, sometimes you would have wood and have it stretched with the cloth. The canvas is kind of like a jean material. Then your ground would be, for today we call it gesso. They would have called it gesso too. And it's just like a latex paint with gypsum in it. And that is the protective layer between the paint and the canvas, the cloth. Then if you go back and look over here on the diagram on the right, what we do, the first is you do an underpainting, so start at the bottom, and then you do another glaze with paint in it that has, how do you explain it? So the first glaze has lots of turpentine in it, and as you work your way up, it gets more and more linseed or whatever medium you're using to thin the paint. And so you build it up in layers, and then at the very end, after it's dried, you put a layer of varnish on it, and that sometimes gets, as it ages, it changes colors. So that's why paintings get dull over time. So it's many layers. It's not just one layer that an artist is doing. It's doing several layers to get that luminosity of color. This one I have a video that will explain more the meaning than I can think of off the top of my head. I just have a few things to tell you. It's a triptych. Triptych just means that it's a panel that is made of 3, and you could fold it, so each, the left and the right side, fold in onto the middle one and close up like a box. And they would have pulled it out only on religious or significant occasions. Let me see. It's oil on wood, so this is a good example of the layering that I was talking about in the previous slide. And do you see the color? It's much more luminous. There's more light. It captures light, it reflects light, more interesting. And then the development of form is easier. The gradation and making things look more round and more realistic. Still, it's very flat because this is early Renaissance and they're still working on the perspective, but they're getting a little bit better. Like if you look at the circle of the table in the middle, it's wrong. But the other angles are getting like a little bit more realistic instead of just trying to do the perspective like we were talking about before. But again, I will include a link and it will talk about a little bit more about the religious significance of this because I'm not that great with the religion aspect of it. It's just a very beautiful painting. Okay, so this is a close-up of the painting that we just saw. And if you look up at the top, you'll see it looks like the Divine Spirit, Jesus coming to maybe Mary. Such a beautiful detail, but look at all the little details that you can get with oil that was probably much harder to do with the Fresco. Like, I've never done Fresco, but it looks like it's much more tedious. The oil, you have a lot more time to let it dry, and you can really work up these little details. And look at the pot up there with the head in it and the strange animal heads, and then even the jewelry on the angel's halo and the beautifulness of the wings, the color development, the texture of the hair, and then of course the roundness of her face and the shadow. So this is the potential of oil, and this is why a lot of artists prefer oil, because you can really develop the details, the color, the texture that most artists are really after. And again, please watch the video. It'll give you more details about the significance of all these little meanings that are hidden in this painting.